Hey, what's going on, developers? Let's say you have created a nice and fancy Next.js application, but if users can't find you on search engines, your work won't be complete. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how we can improve the SEO score of our Next.js applications with the latest features that Next.js version 13.4 has offered. And let me tell you something, these features are awesome and you don't want to miss them. So let's get into it. Okay, I open up a Next.js version 13.4 project. In this project, we have three routes: the home page, the post page, which is a dynamic route, and also the about page. So let's run our server. And as you can see, we have a really simple blog here. And this is the home page with three posts. And if I click on one of these posts here, you can see that we are headed to the post route and then the slug of the post, just a really simple blog here. So in this tutorial, we're not focusing on creating a nice and fancy blog. I'm going to show you how we can use the brand new features of the Next.js version 13 in order to improve the SEO of any Next.js application. So let's get into it. Okay, the first thing I want to mention here is that in the latest version of the Next.js, we don't have to put the favicon inside the public folder. So we can put it just inside the root path of the app directory. So if I click on the favicon, you can see that it's a default icon of the Next.js. And if I go back to our browser, you can see that the favicon is shown before the title of the page. Okay, in the next step, I'm going to create a title and a description for the pages in our app. So I go back to the VS Code and I go to the home page, and here we can just export a metadata object. So I'm going to say export const metadata, and its type is going to be metadata from the next. So let's import it, metadata from the next. And inside it, we can have the title of our page. Let's go ahead with the dummy block. Okay, and then we can have the description of the page, which is going to be, this is the description of dummy block. So let's save this and go back to our browser, and let's go to the home page, and you can see the title of the page is changed to the dummy block. And let's see the HTML elements of the page. You can see that the Next.js created the head tag for us, and inside it we have the title and also a meta tag with the description, and its content is this is the description of the dummy block. So in this way, we can create the title and description for our pages in the Next.js. In the latest version of the Next.js, we can create the metadata object in two ways: statically and dynamically. So the static way is what we have just defined. We can create a metadata object for each pages in our application. But in the dynamic way, we can create the metadata object based on some data that can be changed to our application. So let me show you what I mean. I go back to VS Code, and let's say we want to create the metadata object for the blog post page, which is a dynamic route. So as you can see, the blog post page takes the params object, and the params object has a slug inside it. So based on the slug of the page, we can get the post from our database and then render that post into this page. And by the way, if you want to know where this get post by slug function comes from, we have a getData.ts file inside the lib directory, and inside it I have defined two functions that uses the Prisma client to retrieve the post from our database. So the first one is get all posts, that retrieve all of the posts inside the database, and the second one is get post by slug, that takes the slug as a parameter and then retrieve and return the post with that slug. So let's get back to our blog post page, and let's say that we want to generate the metadata object based on the retrieve post here. So to do that, we can use a function named generate metadata. So here we can export this function, which is a async one, and its name is generate metadata. And just like the blog post page component, it can take the params as its parameter. So we can have the params here and set its type to the props that we have defined earlier. And the return type of this function is a promise that resolves an object of type metadata. And as I have mentioned earlier, this metadata type comes from the next. Okay, and inside this function, first of all, we need to retrieve the post by the slug. So let's copy this line here and paste it inside this function. So first of all, we retrieve the post based on the params.slug, and then we can check if the post is not existed or is undefined. We can return a metadata object that its title is set to not found, and the description says that the page is not found. Just like this. And else, if the post is existed, we can return a metadata object which its title can be set to the post.title, and also its description can be set to the post.description. So the post object has a title and also has a description. Okay, let's save this and let's go back to the browser. And if I click on one of these pages, for example, let's click on the post 2. Here, as you can see, that the title of the page is set to the post 2. And here we can see that the description meta tag is set to the description of this post. So in this way, we can dynamically create our metadata object with the generate metadata function. We just need to export this function from the page.tsx file. Okay, and let's go for another scenario. Let's say that we want to add the name of our application or the brand of our application after the post.title. So we can just concatenate the name of our application dummy block here. So let's save this, and as you can see that the name of our application is concatenated after the title of the post. But there is a problem here that we have to put this brand name in all of our pages, but we can do it in a better way. So let's remove this name of the block here, and let's go back to our home page. Just cut the metadata here, and I go to the root layout of our application and paste the metadata object here, and let's import the metadata type from next. And then here we can use something called template in our title. So let's remove the dummy block here and set the title into an object, and then inside this title object we can have the default, which is set to the default title of our application. So I'm going to put the dummy block here, and then we can have the template. So in this template, we can have a backtext here, and inside it, I'm going to put a % and then S, and then we have the pipe, and then put our brand name. So what does this mean? When our page doesn't have a title, it uses this default title here. And if our page have a metadata object inside it and it has a title, then it uses this template here. So first of all, it interpolates the title of the page that we have defined in the metadata object, and then it concatenates this string that we specify here. So this %s will be the title inside the metadata object that we are going to define in our pages. So let's go back to the post page, and here we can see that the title is set to the post.title. So that %s would be post.title. So let's go back to our layout and save this and go back to our browser, and as you can see here, the title of our post page is set to the post2, which is the post.title, and then a pipe dummy block. So this page has a metadata object inside it, so inside the layout it uses the template object. So in this way we can use the template for our title. It also has an absolute member, and if we set the absolute in any of our pages inside the title object, it doesn't use the template. So let me show you what I mean. I go to the about page, and here let's create a metadata object, and let's say this is the about page, and let's set the title to the object that has the absolute that says about page. Okay, and let's go back to our app, and if I click on the about, you can see that the title of the page doesn't use the template. So every page in our application that has an absolute inside the title of its metadata object, it doesn't use the template that we just have defined in our layout file. Okay, and I think that's it for the title and the description of the metadata object. And let's go for the next section, which is about the canonical URLs. So what is the canonical URLs? A canonical URL is a preferred or official URL of a web page, and it is used to consolidate the ranking signals for that page across multiple URLs that may lead to it. So this is very important because search engines can sometimes see different URLs leading to the same content, which can split the ranking signals and dilute the page visibility in search results. So by specifying this canonical URL, we can tell search engines which version of the page they should consider as a primary one for indexing and ranking purposes. So let's see how we can define the canonical URL in the metadata object. So let's say that we want to define it for our post page. So in order to do that, inside the return metadata object, we can have an alternates object. And then inside it, we can have the canonical property, and then inside it, we can define the canonical URL for our web page. So for example, let's say the final URL address of our web page is the dummyblog.com. So here we can put a backtext here, and then inside it, we can say https www.dummyblog.com, which is the final address of our web app, and then /post, and then we can put the slug of the post here. So let's interpolate the slug of the post here. So let's save this and go back to our browser, and let's go to the home and then click on one of the posts here, and let's open up the head tag, and we should see the canonical URL here. And yeah, you can see a link here which is canonical, and then its href is set to the https dummyblog.com post, and then post 2, which is the slug of the post number 2. So in this way we can define the canonical URL for our pages. So let's go back to our VS Code, and here, as you can see, we have to put the base URL of our web app for each page that we want to set the canonical URL for it. So we can remove the base URL here and go back to our layout file, and here inside the metadata object, we can have a property called metadata base, and then set it to a new URL object, and then put the base URL of our web application here. And let's save this, and here let's refresh the page. Here inside the head element, we can see that the canonical URL of the page is set to the base URL of our web app, and then /post, and then /slug of the post. Okay, and inside this alternates object, we can have a languages object, and inside it we can define the alternative URLs for different languages in our web application. So for example, we have the English Canada, and we can set it to en-ca, and then /post, and then /post.slug. So let's save this and go back to our browser, and you can see that inside the head element we have a alternate link here, and its href is set to http dummyblog/en-ca, and then /post, and then /slug of the post. So in this way we can have different URLs for different languages in our web app. Okay, and the other important meta tag that we can include in our metadata object is the Google site verification. So what is the Google site verification? It's a meta tag that website owner can add to the HTML code of their website, so the Google can verify the ownership of the website. To use this meta tag, a website owner must first sign up with the Google Search Console account and then get a unique verification code, which should be added to the website's HTML code along with the Google site verification meta tag. And once the verification process is complete, a website owner can gain access to a range of features within the Google Search Console, such as data on search queries, backlinks, and more. So by adding this Google Site Verification ID into the HTML of the website, Google can ensure that only owner of the website can have access to the information about the website's performance in search results. So let's say we have a Google Site Verification ID and we want to add it to the metadata object in our web app. So I go to the root layout of our application, and inside the metadata object, we can have a verification object, and inside it we can have the Google, and we can set it to Google Site Verification, and then we can put the ID that is provided by the Google Search Console account. So I just put a dummy ID here, and let's save this and go back to our browser. I go to the home page, and as you can see, we have the Google Site Verification meta tag here. Okay, and let's go to the next section, which is about the Robots.txt file. So what is the Robots.txt file? Well, this is a text file that website owners create to instruct the web robots how to crawl and index pages on their website. This file specifies which areas of your website should not be crawled or indexed. For example, let's say you have an admin page that you don't want to be indexed by the web crawls. So in this file, you specify this admin page not to be indexed by the web robots or web crawlers. So this is the primary use case of the robots.txt file. So if I go to the documentation of the Next.js, we can see that in order to create the robots.txt file, we have three options. The first one is to just create a robots.txt file inside the app directory and then put our configuration of the robots.txt file. The second one is to create the robots.ts file, a TypeScript file, and then return an object that contains the configurations of the robots file. And the third one is that we can return the configuration of the robots file as an object inside the metadata object in our pages. So in this tutorial, we're going to go ahead with the third option. So I go to the VS Code, and let's say we have a admin page that we don't want to be indexed by the web crawlers. So let's create the admin page in a second. Okay, and here we can export a metadata object. And inside metadata object, we can have a robots object, and inside it, we can create our configurations of the robots.txt file. So as I said, we don't want this page be indexed by the web crawlers. So we can set the index to false and no cache to true. And also we can have other properties for this robots object. So let's save this and go to our browser. Let's go to the admin page. And inside the head, you can see that we have a robots meta tag that its content is set to the no index and no cache. So in this way, we can add the configurations of the robots for our pages in Next.js. And the next thing I want to talk about is how to create the sitemap for our web application. So in order to do that, I go back to VS Code, and inside the app directory, I'm going to create a file called sitemap.txt. And then inside it, I'm going to export an async function called sitemap. And note that we have to export default this function. And inside it, I'm going to define our base URL. So I'm going to say const base URL and set it to the base URL of our website. So in my case, it's going to be https://dummyblog.com. And then we have to return an array, and in which we have to create an object for each route of our application. So here we say URL and set it to the base URL, and we also have to define the last modified. And here I'm going to set it to new date. And then let's save this and just copy this object. And let's do it for the about page. And as I said, we have to create an object for each route of our web app. So as you can see, we have a dynamic post route here. And in order to create the sitemap routes for each post, we can do it dynamically. So first of all, we retrieve the post from our database. So I'm going to say const posts equals to await get all post function. And then we can create the post URL here. So I'm going to say const post URL and then map through the posts. And then return an object for each post which has the URL, which is going to be our base URL, and then slash post, and then slash the slug of that post. And let's set the last modified property to the post.updated@add property. And then here inside our return list, we just spread the post URLs. So let's save this and go back to our browser, go to the home page, and let's refresh. And here, let's say sitemap.xml. And as you can see, we have a sitemap here that has a URL for our base URL, about page, and also post 1, post 2, and post 3. So in this way, we can create the sitemap dynamically for all routes in our application, including the dynamic ones. Okay, and now we can go ahead to the next section, which is about how we can create icons dynamically for each pages in our application. So here, as you can see, we have an icon here, a favicon, but how we can create a dynamic icon, a different icon for each pages of our application. So I go back to VS Code, and let's say we want to create a custom icon for the post page. So inside the post/slug directory and side by side our page.tsx file, I'm going to create a file called icon.tsx. And inside it, we can specify the size of our icon and then export a content type, which is set to image/png. And then we export a default function called icon. And inside it, we can return an instance of the image response class. So here, I'm going to say return new image response, which comes from the next/server. And then inside it, first of all, we're going to pass a JSX, which will be our icon. So here I just paste a div and set its style to something like background of black and also color of white, set its display to flex, and also align items and justify content to center. So note that the display of this div must be set to flex or it doesn't work. I don't know the reason behind it, but it doesn't work. So just make sure that you set the display of this div to flex. And then we set the text inside the div to just db, which stands for dummy block. And then after the JSX, we just have to pass the size of our icon, which is set to 32 by 32 pixel here. So in this way, we can create an icon dynamically. So let's save this and go back to our browser and let's refresh and let's go to our one of our pages. And as you can see, the icon of our page is turned to a DB icon. And we can also add a border radius to it. So let's go back to VS Code and set its border radius to something like 5 pixels. And let's save this. And as you can see, the border radius is applied to this icon. So in this way, we can dynamically create an icon using the image response, which comes from the next/server. Okay, and in the next section, I'm going to talk about how we can create Open Graph images for our pages. So what is a Open Graph image, first of all? Well, it's an image that is displayed when a web page is shared on a social media platform such as Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. It is going to be a thumbnail of the page when it is shared on social media platforms. So how we can create the Open Graph image for our pages. So let's say that we want to create a Open Graph image for our post page. So I go to the post/slug directory and side by side our page file, I'm going to create a file called opengraph-image.tsx. And inside it, first of all, I'm going to export the size of the image, which is going to be 900 by 450 pixels. And then we are going to define the content type. So I'm going to export const content type and set it to image/png. And then we can export a default function called OG. So I'm going to say export default async function OG, and this function can access to the params of the page. So first of all, I'm going to define an interface for the props, which has the params inside it. So here we can access to the params. and set it to props interface. And then inside it, first of all, we can retrieve our post from our database. So I'm going to say const post equals to await get post by slug, and then pass the params.slug to it. And then we can return an instance of the image response class, just like the icon, and then put a JSX which defines our image. And to speed up the process, I just paste the JSX, and as you can see, we have a div here, and then inside it we render an image, and its source would be the post/banner URL. So every post in our application has an image called banner, and the banner URL is the URL of that image, and set it all to the post.title. And also we have a div here which makes the image kind of darker, and then we have a div here, and then inside we can put some text on our image. So here we can render the post.title, post.author name, and post.update at property. And here note that if we are going to use table CSS classes, we use the TW props instead of the class name props. And again, here note that we have used the flex class name in our HTML element. So let's save this and go back to our browser. Let's refresh. And here, as you can see, we have a meta tag property called og:image. And this is the URL for our open graph image for this route. So let's go to the page source. Here, as you can see, the meta tag of the OG, and if I copy this URL and paste it here, and here is our open graph image for this route, you can see this white background here, and that's because we didn't pass the size of our image in the image response. So after that, we put the size object which we have defined here. So let's save this and let's refresh, and you can see the white background is gone. And as you can see, we have put the name of the post, name of the author of the post, and also the date of the post, and all of these texts are rendered as a part of the image. So in this way we can create a custom open graph image for our pages. So yeah, I think that's it for this tutorial. But one thing I want to mention here is that there are a lot of more properties that we can define in our meta tag object, and you can find it inside the Next.js documentation. But in this tutorial, we just covered the most important ones. So don't forget to hit the like button, and if you want to see more content like this, please hit the subscribe button. Have a nice time. Bye bye.